Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for hitting play, whether that is here on YouTube to watch this video or to take it in as an audio file over on the Exceptional Admins podcast. I am so excited. We're doing this live. We have an audience today. There's a chat box open for me to be able to see our participants who have joined. My wonderful guest, Jamie, today. This is not her first time on the show. This is her second time. And we had a phenomenal conversation actually in March of 2020. It aired in, you know what is going to be interesting? It's going to air in July of 2023. So that's 3 years from when your original episode number 17, wow. Confidence Currency, aired on the Exceptional Admins podcast. And we're friends and we talk often, and I support all the things that Jamie's doing as she does for my audience as well. So it's a real honor to have her spending time with us this morning, considering prior to the recorded portion, she has a very stacked day. And so we're great for her to share time. And for those that listen to the show regularly, so excited you're back. For those that are new, welcome. Executive presence is the conversation today. And so if you're a regular listener, you know that this is something I love. And so we're going to unpack a ton of it. My guest, Jamie, is here. Jamie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. A day with Helani is a better day. And so I'm thrilled to be spending this time with you and live with our audience members. It's fantastic.
I love it. I love it. We need to know a little bit about you. So let's kind of get that part done. And then we're going to just dive right in.
Excellent. All right. So the byline here, we've got, my name is Jamie McKinney. I'm the best-selling author of Speak Up Sister, the Professional Woman's Guide to Confidence and Success. And my mission is to empower women to ditch doubts, to speak up, and to achieve the careers that they deserve and desire.
That's great. I mean, what a great little package right there, which is so true. Your book is great. And I actually have it on my book page of my website, exceptionaladmins.com, as a suggested read under the leadership reading suggestions. So, okay, executive presence. My first question, do you remember the first time hearing about executive presence?
So let me answer the question behind that question, I guess, is I remember the first time feeling like I did not have it, even though I did not know it by name. So my very first day on the job, so I joined, my first job out of college was in the automotive refinish industry, where I knew absolutely nothing. And I showed up to work. It was August. It was in Ohio. And I wore a sweater set. It was 2 shades of blue and black with the horizontal stripes. And I had on a black skirt that wasn't short, but it was above the knee. I did not have on nylons. And I wore these terrible shoes. I don't know what I was thinking.
I'm uncomfortable just listening to you describe the outfit. Okay, yeah. Keep going.
Exactly. They were black foam slides and open-toed. And when I got to work, I mean, I already knew that I was going to be one of very few females. I was also one of the youngest by a long shot. And I instantly felt like I didn't belong. And the shoes especially, I mean, even saying it right now, and this is well over 20 years ago, I can feel myself getting smaller.
Yeah.
And it was highly uncomfortable. And so fast forward a couple weeks and I get my very first big girl paycheck. And I went and I spent money on my wardrobe. And then fast forward about 2 months, and I'm sitting in that same office. I'm sitting with my manager, Don, and he's giving me feedback on the rotation that I had just completed as part of my training. And he said, Jamie, Scott said, you have a lot of executive presence. And that's exactly what I did. I said, really? And I still didn't know exactly what that meant.
Yeah.
But in my head, what it meant was they see the possibility of an executive in me, and I see that too. And I didn't even know exactly how I accomplished that. But when he said it, and I remember what I was wearing that day also, when he said it, I thought, game on. Yes, yeah, executive presence.
Exactly. It's interesting because I'm listening to you describe your story and I'm trying to figure out when maybe my first intersection with executive presence occurred. And we're about the same age. And I'm just thinking it was when I was on a television set supporting my executive. She had just landed a TV show. She was a New York Times bestselling author, radio talk show host. And I'm now in the presence of people from, Hollywood. And I'm thinking, wow, like not just, and just by the way, presence also for me is posture, right? And if you're thinking of
Mhm.
shoulders over, and not just really that confident stance, I think I really had my shoulders back a lot because I was like, wow, this is big time. And I was also, I think, 20 years old. So it was like,
Mhm.
it wasn't imposter syndrome, but it was like, I've got to meet this situation for what it's calling for. And so I think there'll be some of that will probably pepper through our conversation today. So excited. So I challenge those that are listening and here joining us today, kind of think about, one, do you think you have executive presence? Two, if you're developing it, great. What are some of the things? And I'm sure we're going to give you golden nuggets in a moment. So
Mhm.
let's go right to the next question then. What is executive presence?
What is it? What is it? We often hear, well, you just know it, right? Or more so, you know it when someone doesn't have it. But let's get a little more
True.
specific than that here. There's many definitions. I mean, if you Googled it right now, you'll see the 4 elements of executive presence, the 3 Ps, the 7 Cs. With this variety, this robust portfolio of definitions, you ultimately have to decide what it means for you and what it means for the culture in which you work, because it will vary a little bit in different cultures. But I'll share with you the way I define it. I am a big fan of alliteration because it helps us remember. So the way I define it is that one who has executive presence strives for excellence in demonstrating confidence in communication skills and charisma.
Ooh,
And
charisma. Yes.
and he or she leads with a staunch commitment to curiosity.
Oh, I just came across the term intrinsic motivation,
Yes.
right? Kind of in line there with intellectual curiosity. And for my audience, the driven administrative individual, whether your title is administrative assistant, executive assistant, or you're leaping to a future title that may be before chief of staff, is intrinsic motivation, right? And there's this level of curiosity to your word that people are thinking they want to learn more, right? So you're avoiding stagnation too, which, nobody wants to be stagnant, although everyone wants to press pause. Charisma is a big deal. Yeah, I really like that. And I think that's extremely important. And you bring up a really good point. And I just want to park here for a moment, because you can do a Google search on intrinsic motivation. Like, what the heck is that? And there's going to just be options going for days, right? To your point about just a plethora of portfolio. You have to sit in your own file and say, what does this mean to me? Just like if you had a self-care plan, yours may not match mine or Jamie's, right? And so thinking about what makes sense to you for your executive presence. Any thoughts on that?
The individuality piece or the
And
intrinsic piece
yeah,
or
individuality piece.
yes, it most people think that executive presence is about what they think, they being the HR leaders and leaders in general. And that's an element of it, but what they think is a byproduct of what you think. And I would
So how
say
you carry
intrinsic,
yourself. Yeah.
exactly, intrinsic motivation and your intrinsic value. And that's where the main reason that it's important to have executive presence is not necessarily because 77% of HR leaders believe that high executive presence contributes to faster career growth, but more so because it's for you, so that you can find the space in which you're comfortable and you're leading with your authentic self, and you're doing that with your strengths, you're doing that with your imperfections, you're doing it with the mindset of progress over perfection. And that is what is going to trickle externally and be far more impactful, because when you're faking executive presence, everybody's truth meter on that, it will be going off, and
Exactly.
mostly for you. And so it's mostly about driving your intrinsic value and projecting that externally.
So you said something that causes people to get uncomfortable in a good way.
Do tell.
Authentic self.
Yes.
And, who I was at 20 is different than who I am now in my 40s. And so that is a request and a calling for everyone to stop and say, well, who am I authentically? Like, what do I stand for? And so I want to kind of put one homework assignment out there. And Jamie, if you want to add to it, I'd love to get your wisdom. Kind of make a self mission statement. Like what,
Mm-hmm.
some of those three values, kind of as you were sort of describing the definition of what EP is to you, that's going to be different for everyone. And so maybe it's committed instead of the word hardworking. I am committed. I am reliable. And then once you identify 2 to 4 different things, you start maybe then in columns saying, what are the expressive verbally and with my quote body posture, like what defines that I'm reliable or what defines that I'm committed? And then you kind of have this siloed chart, which could be mind mapping in such a way of like, okay, now I kind of understand how I need to your point, like have that charisma, have executive presence. So sitting in front of board of directors, for my audience, board of directors is going to call for a different composure and presence versus going down the hall to the HR office. You're not being inauthentic in either, right? You're just pulling from different parts of who you are to show up for that moment. What thoughts do you have?
Absolutely. And this is where it starts to get a little confusing because it seems like just a rotating door of things that we need to be.
Yeah.
So with this and with anything, specifics are so important. I had kind of a funny conversation in one of my mastermind groups recently about how do you know when someone else has confidence? What are you witnessing? What are you observing? And for the purposes of our discussion today, I think we can use the term confidence synonymously with executive presence. There's some nuances. And this is a high level leader. And she says, well, it means you can own the room. And I said, okay, well, what does it mean to own the room?
Exactly.
Well, it means you have confidence. We were in this circular conversation.
Circular definition. Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, okay, how would you explain it to a 5-year-old?
Right. That's what we need to be able to do. Yeah.
Right. And it starts with, and I think we'll get into this with the executive presence pyramid of thinking about what are the superficial things. So posture right now, everyone listening to this, I'm sure we can all sit up a little straighter, right? You just increased your executive presence.
Correct.
What are you wearing? An interesting exercise that you can do is watch CNN or some respected news channel of people who are paid for their executive presence and watch it on mute. And just notice the little nuances of their body language. I was watching, I think it was CBS this morning on Sunday, and they were interviewing a group of gentlemen, and one of them had on a suit and the others did not. And the way he was placing his hands, and I was getting really granular with it. And I was standing there in my
healthy obsession you have now. Yeah.
What he was doing. And so it's a classic example of overthinking.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about your executive presence, lean on social learning theory, which is a fancy way of saying we learn by modeling others. And pick out what are the specific 1 or 2 things that you're observing about someone else, and then emulate that in your own behavior. And back to the intrinsic motivation and the intrinsic value, what feels natural for you and what doesn't?
Yeah.
Because this isn't about being like someone else, but it's about learning from others and choosing what from that sample set, what works best and feels most authentic to you, where the energy that you're putting into it is being returned to you, not depleted.
Yeah. Oh, that's so important. And so if we were to complicate it more, right, we're talking in a good way, right? And it's, investing in the listeners. You're thinking about your physical expressiveness. Is that a word? Expressiveness. Sure. I'm going to make it a word. Okay. You're thinking about how you express yourself physically. And then on top of that, you need to add vocabulary, which is a huge thing with, right? I'm hardworking versus I'm committed. Essentially, they both mean the same thing, right? You could pull up the thesaurus, but there is something a little different when we've started using different words. Like I'm really committed at what I do. I'm really hardworking at what I do. There's also at least from how I see it, there's an upper tier of, you said something different. Now people are listening to you from a new place because we're not using kind of that same rinse and repeat language that we see, all the time from the headlines, like the self-care, self-doubt and stuff like that. Let's pick some new words, because then we're going to get people leaning into us, which I believe, tell me if you agree, that's going to also help with their posture and their presence with how they express themselves, because the verbal is sort of matching that physical.
Mhm.
Yeah, really
It's
great.
it's all interconnected, and
Yeah.
our body speaks our truth louder than our words. However,
Mm,
our words and our thoughts especially can influence our body. And I love the statements that you were saying, Helani. I call those your power statements.
mm.
You know, I fill in the blank
We're
is
going
the
to see
most
that on the
powerful.
pyramid in a minute. Yeah. Mhm.
Yep, is the most powerful statement that you can say, because what you
Mm.
put in that blank is
Matters.
shaping your identity,
Yeah.
and you get to choose that.
So
And so
true.
when you say, I commit, I show up powerfully, I use vocabulary
Mm.
words, well, then what are the actions that are following? Likely, if you are committed to that and you're saying the statement with the full meaning behind it, because you can say the statement and not attach any meaning to it. That's kind of cheating. But when you're saying this statement and you're attaching the meaning, someone who says, I have executive presence vocabulary will likely be preparing for her next meeting and speaking the language, talking
Mm,
about the
mm,
economic positioning or whatever the verbiage is that you're hearing executives use. She's intentionally thinking about that. And then here's what's super key. I think we often mistake talking and communication as being synonymous terms.
mm, mhm.
They are not. Talking is a behavior that we all know how to do. Communication is a skill.
So true. It's a
And just
craft.
it's a craft. And just
Yeah.
like, I mean, any skill, from like shooting free throws to speaking with the higher level vocabulary, you run drills, you
Yeah.
practice,
You,
you
oh,
say things out
so
loud.
true. So for everyone listening or watching, I don't want you to get overwhelmed by the excitement. Just think of one thing. Kind of going back to maybe the example of the columns on, what are your 3 things in your mission statement about you? And then what sort of is the body language that's attached to convey that to the outside? And then get the thesaurus out, right? Start thinking of some of the words that you regularly use and what's an alternative word, and make like a word cheat sheet. That, and then just an hour on a Saturday in jammies, you could get a lot done. And then you have a plan. Oftentimes people hear great wisdom like what you're sharing, and they just give up. And I don't want that. And so I really want to invest in all of you who have shown up this morning and who've also hit play when this releases. You can create a plan and it can happen. For my high achievers, patience is key and personal grace is key. Just want to throw that out there. Okay. Why is executive presence important?
It's important for yourself. I mean,
Oh,
it is
so true.
the projection, but it's that you're carrying yourself with the belief that you can.
Mm. Mm. It's in
And
the
a
pyramid.
belief,
That's in the pyramid, isn't it? I think I saw the word. Yeah. Okay, great. We're getting there. We're getting there,
a
everybody.
belief that you can doesn't mean that you have perfected everything. It means, back to the curiosity, that you're learning. And that's one of my favorite I statements is, I am learning.
Yeah.
I am learning helps you get out of your own way in a lot of circumstances. And it also helps you play big enough,
Mm.
because when you are a high achiever, when you do have perfectionist tendencies, when you're maybe a recovering perfectionist, I joined the program in 2013. It's a
Nice.
daily
Yeah.
commitment.
Mm-hmm.
I am learning helps you step into the space of discovery and not taking yourself so seriously in the moment. Because some feedback I'll hear from my ladies is, I'm so afraid of making a mistake in
Oh,
front of someone else.
you got to have your backup one-liner to say, actually, I didn't do that right. Something.
Yeah, or I am learning. And what's interesting is that when we talk about that in a calm setting, where
Mm-hmm.
our amygdala and our prefrontal cortex are communicating at a regular calm pace,
Mm-hmm.
we realize that a mistake that we make, we're the ones that are giving far more attention to that, likely, than others. So again, when we can welcome in the I'm learning, the mistake language tends to dissolve, and it's just like, oh, well, that was a stepping stone.
Right. Oh, such a gift. And it's a gift. And if we shift that mindset, I have 2 podcast episodes, actually one, mistake or learning moment. And I have brief episodes on my show that are permission slips. And I kind of cover that a little bit, but I came up with something which is going to lead us in great to the next question. where post-error guilt
Mm.
lasts longer than taking more time up front to avoid the error. I'm going to say that again. The post-error guilt of the embarrassment or anything in that category could last hours and days, right? You're still thinking about something 3 days later. We got to let it go. We got to move on. But that post-error guilt can take you over versus 5 extra minutes on the front end to avoid the error. And so that doesn't help clearly when you're missing context and you truly make a mistake. But I think it's a beautiful thing that you talk about. We need to be better with accepting learning moments. I think that's how I'll put it. We need to be better with accepting learning moments. So this is, I'm going to read it as it's written for our next question, unless you've got something to add to that.
Go ahead, Melanie.
Okay. Yeah. I heard one woman say that she gets confused. I love this question. She gets confused about how to be approachable, humorous, down to earth, and have executive presence all at the same time. All at the same time. It's a great problem, but it's a problem. What would you say? What would be your guidance for that?
Well, I would be confused about that too. That's a lot of to do all at the same time. I love this question because I have a lot to say about it. One, I would consider the source of the person who delivered that advice.
So who know your audience. So true.
Because I'm sure you've heard the phrase, if you spot it, you got it. And
Ooh, I like that.
Someone calling that out that you don't have it may not have it themselves. So that advice could be given from a space of insecurity, maybe not, but pause to consider the source and the credibility. Okay, credible, move on. Not credible, see what you can do with it to benefit anyways. So that's one thing, like consider the source. Someone who's leading with genuine interest and your best interest in mind, that's advice. That's a question I would be much more interested in listening to.
Oh, so true. Trusted advisor. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Second, though, and this suggestion applies anytime you receive vague or confusing feedback. Ask for specifics. Break it down.
Say that again.
Ask for specifics.
Yes, which means you have to be ready to hear whatever they have to say, but it's information again, and it's a learning moment. Okay, keep going.
Right. It's feedback. Assume positive intent. That's a totally
Positive
different
intent.
trajectory here, but that will help in the moment. So when someone says, Kalani, you need to be more approachable, and I'm adding a little tone and accusatory, aggressive voice in that.
Yeah.
When someone says be more approachable, that could be on this call right now. Everybody would have a slightly different definition, I would guess. So when you hear that, you could say, interesting. Tell me what that means to you. Give me an example of when I wasn't approachable or what I could do differently next time.
Which that's also their opinion. Mm-hmm.
Right. Also sense of humor. Does that mean I didn't laugh at a joke? Does that mean I should be the one leading a monologue? What does having a sense of humor mean? And to your point earlier, is that while you're is that while you're delivering a presentation to the board, or is that while you're in conversation with your team? Ask for those specifics. That's always helpful. And then the third way I would answer this question is to flip it entirely on its head and say, instead of focusing on any of those things individually, let alone trying to do any of them, I suggest this instead. Get present and focus on your listening.
That could be a whole nother episode.
Okay. The powerful gift, the magical gift of listening, because so often, I mean, think about that. If you're sitting in a meeting and you're saying your self-talk is, okay, be approachable, which that in and of itself, when you're being that serious about it, the look on your face is not going to be approachable.
Right.
Be funny, contribute intellectually. What's happening? You're not paying attention at all to what's going on in the meeting. Whereas if you can give yourself permission to be present, and if anybody's multitasking right now, go ahead and practice this. Give yourself permission to pause and be present here and simply listen. And notice how much easier it is to craft a response when you can stay present in the moment. And then you're not forcing yourself to be approachable or humorous or drop that brilliant little one-liner. you're
Yeah.
responding in a natural way. And that takes a lot of pressure off. And calm under pressure is a key trait of executive presence. So you help get out of your own way when you eliminate your distractions.
I mean,
There's a really, go ahead,
oh,
honey.
no, go ahead.
There's a really great book called Captivate by Vanessa Van Edwards. And she's a charisma expert. And she tells a story that I love, that she wanted to work on her listening skills. And so as a challenge to herself, she looked at her calendar and she scheduled a week out where she was taking a vow of silence. And then as the week approached, she realized that there was a conference coinciding with that same week that she was attending. So she went to the conference, and on her name tag, she noted that vow of silence so that when people came up to her, she could acknowledge the name tag and everyone understood, and she got to practice. Well, there was a woman that she encountered in the hallway who knew who she was, and she was so excited to meet her. Vanessa, just, all kinds of things. And Vanessa referred to the name tag, and they continued on and wound up exchanging cards. And Vanessa gets an email from this woman a few days later, and it says, Vanessa, thank you so much for the conversation. I greatly enjoyed speaking with you.
I've heard about this before. They think it's a conversation when most likely they're the only one communicating.
And
They got airtime. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's one of Maslow's basic hierarchy. It's Maslow's basic hierarchy of needs. Acknowledgement is something that we all seek. And so when you hold space for someone, that's demonstrating charisma. That's demonstrating passion for what someone else is saying.
Yeah.
And that is executive presence without even speaking a word.
So true. So powerful. For my type A listeners, just want to talk to you for just a moment. Jamie was talking about the importance of loosening the pressure, loosening your grip. And for my regular listeners, I like to identify as a lowercase letter A for type A versus uppercase. Maybe that's a part of your journey in developing your brand, which has a category of executive presence, which is why I'm excited we're having this chat today. So loosening your grip just a little bit, giving yourself more grace would be really great. Thanks for the suggestion of the book. I will have in both the video and the audio of show notes for that. I actually had not heard of that. I've heard of that story, but I had not heard of that from her. So very excited about that. How do you respond? Which we just kind of covered. How do you respond when you need to improve your executive presence?
And so we kind of specific.
Ask for a specific. I want to just highlight that. Ask for a specific, so everyone listening can also. I want to insert a quick story. I was training a group of admins, and one in particular had a reputation at the company that she was a bulldog. And connected to that was, gosh, so-and-so, you've got control issues. And I flipped the script. And so for some of my listeners, I want to provide this wisdom right here. And Jamie, I'd love your input. It was literally in the moment of the training where I said, well, your control is attached to the fact that your name is on the project and you want to be successful. And therefore you want the end product to look great, even if it's you alone or in a group of people, kind of like we're in high school, who's leading the group project. I said, you have what I want to now call success issues, not control issues. Success issues on the fact that you want a successful end product, whether that's just booking travel, whether that's creating a town hall. So because of that, you quote, want to have a tight grip on the control of every little detail because you want it to be successful. Jamie, when I tell you that quick story, what kind of might come to mind?
So fun fact, Helani, I don't think you know this about me, but I have a certification in metaphors, which is really random.
Yeah, I love that.
Diploma certificate that I have. And so it makes me think of the metaphor of a race car driver. I don't know much about race car driving, but what I will say is visualize the driver who has his or her hands on the wheel. What do you think her grip is like? Do you think it's white knuckling? Do you think it's really loose? Do you think it's somewhere in between? What do you think her grip is like?
Tight, intense, white knuckle.
We would think that, right?
Oh,
but actually, race car driver's grip is firmly loose, if that makes sense. So it's not super tight. It's not loose. It's somewhere in between where there's a little bit of wiggle room. Because when you think about it, when they're on that racetrack, a sudden movement, when you're holding really tight,
Going that
can
fast.
wind up in huge disaster. Whereas a sudden movement, when you've got the comfortable grip, allows you to respond in a way that keeps you on course and not react in a way that can be disastrous. So when I hear you share that story about being tied so tightly to the success factors, it makes me think, when you have that grip and a little something knocks you off course, which is going to happen.
Yes.
Whoa, you're derailed.
Yeah.
You're heading toward disaster. And as we all know with race cars, it's usually not one, right? There's others that go down with it. So this idea of loosening your grip and welcoming and permission. I mean, if you can, if for type, I mean, I speak right. I'm recovering perfectionist, type A, high achiever, like all the, right?
Yeah.
I mean, TMI, but like even had GI issues because this was such a big issue for me.
It does not help us, for all those listening, that it messes with your entire system. Absolutely.
No.
Yeah.
But when you can invite in this idea of, you know, if I could just loosen my grip a little bit, I might see things that I couldn't otherwise see. I mean, I can feel the calm wash over me just in saying that. And again, calm under pressure, a calm mind, that's one with executive presence, as opposed to one who's frantic and so reactionary the second that something doesn't go according to plan.
I just started taking tennis lessons, and literally, if you hold your racket too tight, it will not actually finish the throw and get where you want it to go. So I was listening to you going, oh, that's what my tennis instructor is telling me. So I think attached to that, and then we're going to go to the next thing, and I'm going to share my screen for the pyramid, is type A, lowercase a. It's that loosening of the grip. And I know I've shared that with you before. So type A, lowercase a. Okay. Let me share my screen because I want to show what we're going to, can you see that? Yeah. Great. Yes. We've got your wonderful executive presence pyramid, and I cannot see the chat anymore. So we'll come back to it if anyone has questions when we stop sharing the screen. Why don't you give us just a quick rundown on this, and let's hear about how this resonates with you and how you want people to think about it as they move from our time today forward.
Sure. So in preparing for our conversation today, Helani, I was reminded of just how confusing executive presence can be.
Yeah.
And we're trying to be all things to all people, and we have moving definitions. We wind up being frustrated, and then we're moving away from executive presence instead of toward it.
Yeah.
So I put together this pyramid. Notice curiosity is the foundation of it.
Yeah.
To help anyone who's really committed to developing executive presence to look at this from the bottom to the top. And almost use, especially in that very first layer, the confidence piece as a checklist to say, am I doing these things? Because as you're doing those things, as you're committed to your I am or your I statement, right? As you're focusing on your appearance and you are doing what feels authentically good and empowering for you, as you're owning your strengths, not dismissing them.
Yeah.
Once you've got a healthy level of mastery on this, or a comfort level, then I invite you, okay, now start to focus on the communication. It's important to do it in this order because this is a pyramid. It is foundational. I mean, it's like Tetris, right? Like if you're not Tetris, Jenga, if you pull out the bottom one, the rest of them fall.
Yeah.
So focus in order, and you'll notice how much easier it is to cultivate the things that are higher on the pyramid.
Yeah. I like that you have in communication sound bites. We were kind of touching on that in a different way, sort of the one-liners. And I think sound bites is a great way to put it, because you could have a category in, you know, what's my sound bite for X and Y. Maybe that's when I'm talking, as we had the example earlier, right? The board of directors, which is part of the charisma, you know, better small talk, that listening component. I would almost challenge, can we have listening in every category?
You absolutely can have listening in every
makes
category.
sense. Yeah. The charisma part, convey warmth and positivity, you know, which I think for me personally, when I read right under charisma, That's the loosening the grip, right? If you're intense, you may be hot, not warm. And so it's like, oh my goodness. Positivity is always key. Craft that mastery. That's so great. Cultivating relationships, which is great. And a lot of the times people are like, I don't have time for some of this. And that's where we need you to remember, not all of this has to be for you. Decide
Right.
and surrender to a little bit of this will apply. Also, not being overwhelmed in that this is too much to do. You could have an entire year program for yourself of little micro wins, dependent on whether you work with Jamie one-on-one, because she does one-on-one coaching, or you bring her into your organization to talk about all the things that she has mastered and still mastering. She has taken in to continue to try to master. And I think vision is great. Let's end here on this vision triangle, please. Tell us a little bit about that.
People who have direction know where they are going. And certainty projects confidence. And as we know, confidence is very contagious.
So true.
So having the vision, knowing where you're going, knowing where your organization is going, being committed to a project, that vision is so powerful. And having passion for that vision, which is a great reminder, care about what you do. And if you don't care about what you do something different. That's just, and like you said, some people may look at this and say, well, I don't have time to do this. Well, I would posit that if you are committed to your career growth and your career trajectory, which I hope you are, because that means you're playing big enough and you are honoring the gifts that our higher power gave you, you don't have time not to do this.
So true. And
it's not a matter of doing all of it at the same time.
Right.
It's again, pick one or two things. I mean, if today your thing is, I'm going to be mindful of my posture and I'm going to take intentional breaths, great. Those
You're
are
cheap. Yeah. Yes.
Shift.
So I think a good roadmap, right, is what's my one focus today, right? And just and so many of us type A's and all the different labeling that we've mentioned, we have such lofty goals. And I know you'll agree with me. That's wonderful. But in order to get to Vail, you have to take a left turn and a right turn a variety of times to get on the freeway to get to Vail. So you need a roadmap, you need directions, and you need each intersection, each left turn, every right turn. And so I want to point that out. I also have a quick episode on my show. It's called Software Update 11.1 to 11.2. We talk about how I talk about how our cell phones have micro updates, right? Your iPhone's not going to have an update from version 11 directly to 12. They're going to make those micro updates. And so we live in a fast society. Give yourself more grace. And thanks for the visual. That's really awesome to have. The society component of, wanting to just do it fast, instant results. And I think that that's hurting us. Yeah.
Yeah. Skills don't get built overnight.
No, they don't.
But conditioning does.
So true. Have we talked about the book, Atomic Habits?
I can see it from where I'm sitting right now.
Yeah, mine is way down there on my bookshelf. But yeah, I'll put that one in the show notes. And I have a habits, goals, and boundaries episode too. Jamie, this is so fantastic. We're going to just kind of close it out here. For anyone that's joined us here virtually, please drop us a question in the chat while we have Jamie for just a few more minutes so that we can give you an answer so you can leave with even more today. But I'm going to kind of do a launch pad. I'm going to talk about a couple of the different things that we covered so that everyone sort of has a recap. It's important to remember that there is possibility for executive presence with a plan. Possibility with executive presence. A part of that is thinking about your expressiveness when you're sitting, right? Because as you were sort of talking about, if you're thinking about like that one example, this person wanted to be these 4 different things, you're intentionally just thinking inward and you're missing the listening, right? So that's kind of the second thing is be present to actually listen, and also avoid the standard go-to of starting to think of an answer to contribute. Sometimes you don't need to. To your point, the example from the book, right? She did no talking, right? Because she had a vow of silence, and the woman thought they had a great conversation, and she was only listening. And I think also, tell me.
If you're the caveat to that, the exception to that is that if you're in a one-on-one meeting and you're with the top executive, you will need to participate.
Yes, of course. Right. Excellent point. Thank
and
you.
that's where I invite you to refer to that second layer of the pyramid, the communication,
Yeah.
creating your sound bites in advance. Okay. Just
Yeah.
I feel like it would be reckless to say, well, you can just sit there in silence. Not
Yes, not every, and so kind of to the other point I mentioned, who's your audience, right? And what situation is calling for what part of you. And that goes into being authentic, right? And sort of maybe having a mission statement for yourself with 3 things that you really resonate with that are those pillars for you and your executive presence, which, by the way, that can always be in draft form. As you grow your fluency on different things, whether it's in your organization, whether it's in your industry or in your department, that's going to mean that you're updating yourself, as we were just kind of talking about. Positive intent when people are giving you feedback would be a good thing to just kind of remind. When someone's giving you like, hey, you need to X, Y, and Z, well, give me some solid examples. I love that you pointed that out. We really need those examples. And if they can't give them, then maybe their feedback is not as important as it should be put a lot of weight into. I love that you had the metaphor, that loosening of the grip. Going to mention type A again. And I think it's really beautiful. I'll have in the show notes, as we just kind of wrap this up, an option for people to see that wonderful pyramid that you put together. Thanks for sending it to me this morning so we could use it as a part of our conversation. And I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you immensely.
Yeah.
Immensely.